Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on root cause analysis and systemic corrective action. My name is Shannon Craddock, and I'm the Programs and Accreditations Manager at PJR. Thank you for attending today, and I hope you'll be glad that you did. Today's webinar has been repeated many times, but is going to focus on some new changes to our nonconformity report form. So attendance is crucial to understand some of the changes to this form and how it'll impact your organization. Before we go further, it's worth pointing out that every participant has been muted to ensure sound quality. At the end of today's prepared presentation, I'll answer as many questions as I can. Kindly type your questions into the question or chat feature, and I'll address them as time allows. Additionally, I encourage you to visit our website at www.pjr.com for information on how to access a digital recording of this webinar, as well as information on new upcoming webinars in the future. So what are we going to cover today? Today we're going to talk about why we're doing this, why this particular topic. We're going to deconstruct the audit finding and talk about what makes a well-written audit finding. I'm a firm believer that a well-written audit finding is really important to ensure sound problem solving. We'll then talk about actions taken to correct or corrections, containment actions. And it's here that we're going to talk about extent analysis, which is the new part of this presentation and the new part of our nonconformity report form. We'll also talk about root cause analysis, actions taken to prevent recurrence of an issue or corrective actions, actions taken to prevent occurrence or preventive actions, and then corrective action verification activities. So why are we doing this? In general, we want your organization to improve. I'm a firm believer that there should be a strong correlation between how an organization does on its audits and how they're performing in the eyes of their customer. Let's face it, the goal of any accredited management system is understanding what your customers want and giving it to them. And if you're solving problems and preventing recurrence, that's going to increase the likelihood that your customers are getting what they desire, whatever that is. And contrary to popular belief, the purpose of a management systems audit isn't to try to convince your auditor to write as few nonconformities as possible. Where they exist, they should be accepted. And then you need to take systemic corrective action for each and every nonconformity that's found. And that ensures that we see the stronger correlation and that you're really giving your customers what they want. As I said in the introduction, a well-written audit finding is key to good problem solving. So an audit finding should have three distinct parts. The first is the statement of nonconformity or the problem statement. Second is objective evidence to assist in understanding how deep or how broad is the issue. So you're going to see a lot of details here. And then a clear citation of the requirement that's not being met. If an audit is written and it does not contain these three component parts, first of all, PJR auditors shouldn't write findings that don't look this way. And you shouldn't accept them either. I'm telling you that you are completely empowered to ask the auditor to rewrite the finding. Reject these at the closing meeting if they do not contain these three component parts. From time to time, an auditor may discover an opportunity for improvement. An opportunity for improvement is an area that an auditor notes that an organization could improve upon. It's currently conforming, but the conditions are right, and if the perfect storm occurs, it could become a non-conforming situation. As the situation is conforming, there'll be no citation of a requirement not being met. So let's talk about that statement of nonconformity. The common pitfall we'll see here is that often the nonconformity that's recorded is not the problem, but a symptom of the problem. So it's important that the problem be expressed in terms of an issue with the system. If the problem is expressed in terms of a person or a specific incident, it's at the symptom stage. And unfortunately, I see both internal auditors and third-party auditors make this mistake. So it's important for the organization to get to the true issue, the systemic issue, or the problem-solving efforts won't be effective. So fixing symptoms will not stop the issue from recurring. So I always illustrate, and I use the same analogy every time. Bear with me if you've heard it before. If you're not feeling well, you're running a fever and you have a sore throat, taking Tylenol or Aleve or another over-the-counter medication may help your symptoms, but it's not going to stop the issue from recurring if in fact you have a strep throat infection. All the Tylenol in the world aren't going to kill the strep throat bacteria. So the organization needs to figure out what the systemic issue is, i.e. the strep throat infection, and take care of that. Reducing, eliminating, alleviating symptoms isn't going to prevent recurrence. Furthermore, a well-written nonconformity should stand the test of time. Your organization should be able to look back at nonconformities that were written years ago and understand exactly what the problem was. So let's look at a poorly written finding to hopefully solidify what a good statement of nonconformity should look like. Here's a poorly written finding. There was no training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954 indicating competence to run that job. This is a symptom, not the true problem or systemic issue. Here we're confusing objective evidence with the statement of nonconformity. A better way to write this statement of nonconformity is the system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. And then support that with objective evidence to assist in understanding. No training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954, indicating competence to run that job. And then there's the citation of the requirement that's not being met. In this case, 9001-2015, 72D. And you'll note that we're taking that requirement as far out as possible. So selecting the most specific shall, not just saying section 7.2, but 7.2D. So the well-written finding is the system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. This focuses on the systemic issue. A problem statement need not focus on the incident or a specific issue or person, i.e. the operator running job 9954. You want them to fix the broken system, not just the one symptom that was observed. Okay, another poorly written finding. The quality auditor in the blue cell was using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. Again, we're expressing this in terms of a very specific person. This is at the symptom level, not a systemic issue level. Again, we're confusing objective evidence with the statement of nonconformity. A better way to write this, the document control system is not completely effective. You'll note here in the statement of nonconformity, we're actually using the word system. And the objective evidence to aid in understanding the depth and breadth of the issue. Quality auditor in the blue cell was using an uncontrolled form. And then a clear citation of the requirement not being met, 7531A of 9001-2015. And again, you'll see we're carrying that out as far as we can. The appropriately written finding, the document control system is not completely effective. We're focusing on the systemic issue and not a particular person or symptom of the problem. So in summary, When you review a statement of nonconformity that's written by your internal audit team, a customer during one of their audits, or a PGR audit, make sure that they're distinguishing between the systemic issue and the symptoms of the problem. Make sure the final statement of nonconformity focuses on the systemic issue, but yet that the data, the objective evidence, and the citation of the requirement not being met are sufficient to assist in understanding the depth and breadth of the issue. PGR has an internal document known as our Advisory 3 that requires all auditors to document any non-fulfillment of a requirement as such. In fact, I personally tell them it's inexcusable not to do so. There's no benefit for the auditee if you mutually agree not to write up a true nonconformity. Again, all you're going to do is fix the symptoms, not understand what's causing the issue and eliminating the cause. And this really contributes to the diminishment of the integrity of accredited management system certification. So it's our expectation that all nonconformities written by PGR auditors need to be documented as described. Statement of nonconformity, objective evidence, and finally a clear citation of the requirement that's not being met. Okay, let's move on to actions taken to correct. These are called corrections or containment actions. And these are actions taken with respect to the symptoms or incidents. So here we're dealing with the very specific incident or person that was discovered to be non-conforming. They're very important and should be taken as soon as possible to stop the systems from persisting or getting worse. Corrections typically take two forms. Something along the lines of, we calibrated the gauge, or we controlled the form that was found to be in a state of not being controlled. Or adding a layer of inspection to the system to catch any future occurrence of the issue. Keep in mind, however, that inspection adds cost to the system, not value. And once you understand the root cause of the problem and corrective action is implemented, you'll learn that costly added inspections should be able to be removed from the system. Corrections or containment actions should be very specific. For example, the training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954 was updated to reflect the operator's competency to run the job unsupervised. Or all copies of the uncontrolled form the quality auditor in the blue cell was using were destroyed. Okay, here's the new content. So if you've started looking at your Instagram or checking your email, you'll want to tune in here, especially if you've heard this presentation before. It's been done many times. Corrections need to include an extent analysis. An extent analysis also is referred to as a look across. So your auditor, the PGR auditor, may have found one instance, but how many more are there? Really, what is the depth and breadth of the problem? So the PGR auditor may uncover one or more non-conforming examples. They may see that a gauge is out of calibration, or there's a single document that's not controlled, or they found a couple of training records that weren't updated. A properly executed and well-written extent analysis would read like this. So in this particular instance, it's going to become clear that the crux of the auditor's finding is a gauge system, a gauge recall system that's not effective. And they found two gauges that were not in a state of known calibration. So the extent analysis would read, we verified the two gauges found by the PGR auditor, numbers 2458 and 1354, both were conforming. Our extent analysis included the 213 other gauges in our facility. So you note we're using very specific numbers here. Every gauge in the facility is being looked at. Only one, number 5858, was found to be out of calibration. It was calibrated and returned to service. And the organization analyzed whether any product was measured with this gauge since it was last in a known state of calibration, and discovered luckily that it had not been used. Our nonconformity report form has been modified to include a blank for extent analysis. While use of the PGR nonconformity report form is optional, you always have the right to use your own form. You need to make sure that your form includes an extent analysis if you're going to use your form. Otherwise, I would encourage you to use our form. So what I'm going to do now is pull up a copy of our nonconformity report form for you to look at. So you'll see here that our nonconformity report form includes a spot for the organization to respond to the nonconformity. There's a blank for correction, and we've added a blank for extent analysis. And of course, we've kept the blocks for root cause and corrective action. So here is that new section, extent analysis. And that's where you would, for example, if the auditor discovered, 2 training records that weren't updated, you'd look at all the training records that were not updated, that are in the organization, and discover how many more are out of date and need to be updated, and include the results of that analysis or look across in this blank here. Okay, moving on to root cause analysis. One of the common pitfalls we see is that organizations will restate the incident or the problem for the root cause analysis, and this is never acceptable. An example would be our organization failed to update the training matrix for the operator running job 9954. Well, yes, we already know that. We told you that the matrix wasn't updated. Why is it that the matrix was not updated? Or the quality auditor in the blue cell didn't use the right form to record the results of first piece inspection. Again, we already know this. We told you this in our finding. Your job is to uncover why. And uncovering why is really the crux of root cause analysis. Another common pitfall is giving containment actions for the root cause analysis, and this is also not acceptable. So again, if you're not paying attention and checking your email, this is a really important slide. A good root cause analysis answers this question. What in the system failed such that the problem occurred? Again, a good root cause analysis will answer this question. What in the system failed such that the problem occurred? You'll see here the focus is on the system, the broken system, and fixing that, and not just a symptom of the problem. And you see that word system right in that question there. It's possible that problems may have multiple root causes or several possible root causes. If the root cause cannot be discovered, if you can't narrow it down, you have to take corrective actions for all possible root causes. You'll know you've discovered the true root cause if you can turn the problem on and off, just like a light switch. So if the defect can be recreated and the problem returns, you know you've discovered the true root cause, just like a light switch. If the problem cannot be turned on and off at will, then the root cause has probably not been found. I used to work in automotive manufacturing, and we had a particular manufacturing cell that was causing us issues. We were mixing left-hand and right-hand parts. We convened a problem-solving team, and we determined that the narrow manufacturing cell configuration was causing the operators to mix up left-hand parts and right-hand parts when they were doing the pack out. So we moved the manufacturing press, we reorganized the cell, but guess what? We were still getting reports from our customer that right-hand parts were being packed in left-hand boxes and vice versa. So we knew that the narrow manufacturing cell configuration was not the true root cause. The problem never went away. So we went back to the drawing board, convened a problem-solving team, invited a few more people, and it was actually a third shift material handler that said, you know what? If it was impossible to pack a left-hand part in a right-hand box and a right-hand part in a left-hand box, this issue wouldn't happen, regardless of the configuration of the manufacturing cell. So we worked with packaging engineers to re-engineer the packaging. It was impossible to pack a left-hand part in a right-hand box and vice versa. The problem went away completely. We turned it off like a light switch. In a controlled environment, we reintroduced the old pack-out boxes and the problem recurred. We could turn the problem back on. We knew we had the true root cause. There are a lot of different techniques for root cause analysis. Is not a fishbone diagram, but the one we're going to talk today is the 5Y or the Y technique. The Y technique, because sometimes you can get to the true root cause in 3 Ys. Sometimes it'll take more than 5 Ys. Okay, so let's go back to the examples we've been following through today's presentation. You'll remember our first nonconformity. The system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. And the objective evidence, no training matrix for the operator running job 9954, indicating competence to run that job. Okay, well, why is it, there's that word, why is it that there was no training matrix for the first shift operator? Well, the first shift supervisor failed to update the training matrix as required by the first of each month. Well, why did they forget to do this? Well, before the end of the previous month, the HR manager would email the training matrix template to all the department supervisors, but that didn't happen this particular time. Why? Why didn't it happen? The HR manager left the company before the end of the month and her replacement didn't email the template to all the supervisors. Well, why? Again, why didn't her replacement know to email the template to all the supervisors? Well, the procedure for training didn't include a requirement to prompt the new HR manager to email the template to all the supervisors. So in this case, the organization stopped at 4 Ys. And truth be told, it's a little bit of a gray area. Can you go a Y further? Maybe, maybe not. But if you think you've gone far enough, I always encourage organizations to include many people in this problem-solving discussion and not just one person working in a vacuum sitting at their computer. And the more viewpoints and opinions you have, and if most people are agreeing, yes, we've gone far enough, this is the true root cause, there's increased confidence in that root cause analysis. All right, let's look at our second example. The document control system is not completely effective. Objective evidence, the quality auditor in the blue cell was using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. Well, why were they using an uncontrolled form? Well, controlled hard copies of the form had all been used, so the quality auditor resorted to an uncontrolled form. Well, why did they do that? Why didn't they just get copies of the controlled form? Well, the quality auditor in the blue cell wasn't aware that when there were no hard copies of a particular form, that the latest version of all documents could be accessed through the company's database. Why didn't they know about this in the company's database? The blue cell quality auditor wasn't given a username and password with access to the database. Why weren't they given access? HR did not have a policy to ensure all new hires are granted a system username and password. Again, this organization's problem-solving team felt that they got to the true root cause in only 4 Ys. All right, let's take a moment to discuss some of the things we won't accept as root cause. Oversight, we misunderstood the requirement. I forgot. Another ISO 9001 blunder, our consultant messed up, or human error. Again, we're trying to fix systems, and the system should be fixed in such a way that people can't make mistakes. I do want to touch briefly on this second bullet point, misunderstanding the requirement. I do have a little bit of flexibility with this if it's an early audit, so maybe a stage 2, or an organization is transitioning to a new version of the standard. You may not truly understand the intent of a requirement until you're being audited. And during the audit, it becomes very clear what the intent of the requirement is. That's one instance where I might accept misunderstanding the requirement, but the others are never acceptable in terms of root cause. All right, now let's move to corrective action. Corrective actions should address the root cause. They therefore should answer that very important question of what in the system failed such that the problem occurred. Common pitfall is many organizations will repeat their containment actions or corrections instead of corrective actions. This isn't acceptable. Not only should they address the system, but they should be irreversible and involve a change in the system. And training in and of itself is generally not a system change. Furthermore, as I previously stated, incident-specific actions or corrections, containments, are not reversible. In the automotive and other industries, corrective actions should prompt changes to your FEMAs and control plans and may require a new PPAP. Take credit for any corrective actions you've implemented. There needs to be at least one corrective action for each root cause that's identified. And as I stated before, subsequent data should show that the problem has 100% disappeared and you're turning it off like a light switch. So we knew we didn't have the true root cause by simply moving the manufacturing cell configuration and making it wider. We only knew we had the true root cause of changing the configuration of the pack-out boxes because that showed that the problem had 100% disappeared. All right, so let's look at corrective actions for the examples that we've been following through today's presentation. The system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. Here's our corrective action. The procedure for training was updated to include a requirement for the HR manager to email the training matrix template to all supervisors for updating before the end of the month. And the new HR manager was trained on this requirement. And she added an Outlook reminder to ensure she consistently performed this task. Does this corrective action address our root cause? Well, let's go back and check. Our root cause was the procedure for training didn't include a requirement to prompt the HR manager to email the template to all the supervisors. And now it does. The procedure for training has been updated. There is a training component, but we didn't just train. There's a permanent system change to the procedure. And there's also the addition of an Outlook reminder to ensure it happens. All right, let's take a look at our second example. The document control system is not completely effective. Here, our corrective action is the new hire work instruction was revised to include a requirement to grant all new hires a username and password for the database as appropriate. HR personnel were trained on this change. Does this corrective action address the root cause? HR didn't have a policy to ensure all new hires are granted a new username and password. Was our root cause? And now our corrective action, there's a new hire work instruction update to include a requirement to grant every new hire a username and password. There's training, but it's not just training in our corrective action. There's the permanent system change to the work instruction. So when training is part of a corrective action response, the response should also contain the technique that will be used to verify training effectiveness. Are you going to do subsequent sampling? Are you going to administer a test or exam to gauge the effectiveness of that training? Okay, let's move on to preventive actions. Now, preventive actions will answer one of two questions. What other systems exist that might have the same root cause present? Or what systems could I have had in place that would have prevented this from happening in the first place? So some common pitfalls here. Many corrective action reports will put corrective actions for preventive actions. But keep in mind that preventive actions address the future, not the past. What could still happen, not what did happen. Preventive actions address the system, not the incident. Remember that preventive actions address what could still happen, not what did happen. So there'll be no symptoms. There's just a system that's in danger of being broken. So you want to proactively implement an action to prevent occurrence of an issue in the first place. Keep in mind, preventive actions are not only identified because of nonconformities. Management system standards require preventive action as a proactive, risk-based process with inputs from a lot of different sources. For example, near-miss reports, 5S programs, safety walkthroughs, lean initiatives, employee or customer suggestions. In other words, no nonconformity should never mean no preventive actions. Finally, let's conclude today's presentation with a couple words about corrective action verification. And this is a critical and often not performed step in the problem-solving process. Many corrective action forms don't have places for verification at the appropriate locations. And that prompt for verification, just like the addition of a prompt for an extent analysis, ensures that it consistently happens. Set up your form for success. So in a robust verification effort, what needs to be looked at? Well, first, you want to make sure that containment actions and corrections have been taken, and they need to be in the past tense. Proper root cause analysis has been performed. And again, you know this because the problem has been turned off like a light switch. Recreating the defect turns the problem back on. Irreversible systemic corrective actions have been implemented. Training's great and should be part of a corrective action response, but not the only part. Also, your verification efforts should look to see that if the corrections that were taken were of the type of adding that layer of inspection, that they've been removed where appropriate. And if preventive actions are applicable, that those have also been taken. Keep in mind that corrective actions are reversible. And when you're changing a system, it means you're changing the way that work is being performed. Boy, do I know that change is difficult. Systems and people tend to return to where people feel comfortable. So you need to continue to verify actions until you get positive results, even after the first verification. In fact, many studies suggest that keeping a corrective action open for a period of 18 months after the issue is discovered and doing consistent verification, and if you continually get positive results at the 18-month mark, you can close it on your log, your corrective action log. So the focus shouldn't be getting things off your log as quickly as possible. The focus should be making sure that you get consistently positive results on your repeated verification efforts. I'd like to acknowledge that some of today's slide content was provided by the IAOB. And that concludes the prepared portion of today's presentation. I'll now open the floor to any questions that you may have. So kindly type those into the question or chat feature. Okay, bear with me, folks, as I read through these questions. So Brenda is asking, non-conformities may result from the audit, but if non-conformities result from other things, management review, customer complaints, should problem solving be carried out in the same way? Yes, all standards require disciplined problem solving if there's a non-conforming situation, whether it's an audit non-conformity or a customer complaint or an internal process non-conformity. That is indeed the expectation, Brenda. I'm getting a question from Peter. He states he was under the impression that not every NC requires a corrective action. I think if you need a yes or no answer, every non-conforming situation requires problem solving and a corrective action response. He says, I like the form that was showed, but my question is there another corrective action verification form that is used in addition? So let me pull up that form again. Bear with me one moment. And you'll see, Peter, that this form does include a prompt for verification. And it's verification by the third-party auditor. So here our auditor is going to be verifying that the corrective action is effective. It is true that this form does not include a spot for the organization itself to verify the effectiveness of the corrective action. Perhaps you might open your own CAR or include verification notes in the corrective action section. We can look at making some revisions to our form to include a spot for you to record your verification activities. That's an excellent suggestion. Okay, Peter's also asking, how many verifications do you recommend? Peter, that really depends how many times you verify a corrective action really depends on the nature of the issue. You know, getting a positive verification 24 hours after you implement the corrective action shouldn't give you confidence to close the issue. Keep it open. Remember what I said, people and systems tend to return to where they feel comfortable. You want to make sure your corrective action is sticking before you conclude that the corrective actions are effective. A copy of this presentation will be available for download from our website at www.pjr.com. A copy of the PJR corrective action form is included in the newest version of our audit workbooks, Malcolm. We have registered software development organizations to 9001 2015, Michael, yes. Getting a question about how do you address human error. Dina, if you're going in the direction of human error for root cause, you really need to redirect your problem solving efforts to what type of system fixes could you implement so that people aren't able to make mistakes. Now, I realize that sometimes these may not be cost effective, but that's the direction that your problem solving should be going. Brian's saying, where did the extend analysis come from? Is this a 9001 requirement or from other management system standards? Really, Brian, all management system standards require some form of problem solving, and extend analysis is really part of a robust correction. So to answer your question, it's a requirement from all management system standards. Some standards state it a little bit more explicitly than others. Karen is asking if there's issues or problems that occur that don't require a root cause analysis, such as a go and do it issue. Problems you just fix and the problem goes away completely. None of those issues come to mind, Karen, but maybe your root cause and your extend analysis shows that there was just one escape and that was only one gauge. Perhaps then your corrective action will be very different than if it was a complete systemic breakdown. But you really wouldn't know that until you do a root cause. So to say that a problem doesn't require a root cause analysis might be erroneous. Susan is asking the date on the extend analysis. It would be the date it is completed by the auditee. So our organization completed an extend analysis on February 13th, 2020. John's asking, how do you determine the difference between a minor incident and an actual NC that needs addressing? John, if it's a non-conforming situation, you should always be doing problem solving. Grace is making the statement that there are times when we cannot verify a corrective action is successful until a particular situation occurs, like the customer making an order or approving a product. And this can take a lot of time. Yeah, that's absolutely appropriate. I would fully expect that you would keep this issue open on your log until the situation presents itself. There'll be no penalty from the PGR auditor from that. In fact, Grace, the penalty would be closing the issue on your log before you've done an appropriate verification. Roxanne is a great question. If the extent analysis is required for open nonconformities from a previous PGR audit or only for new audits. So it is for audits essentially that have been done, I don't know the exact date, but if you, in the workbook supplement you receive from the auditor, if it has the new extent analysis nonconformity report, that's when it would be required. So that form looks to have an effective date of 11/15/2019, but some auditors may not have started using that form right away. Steve is making the statement that typically the PGR auditor would review corrective actions from the previous audit. This happens all the time. We try to close these out before the auditor comes back. If we have yearly audits, how can we keep them open for the 18th month mark, for example? Well, I guess it would be my expectation, Steve, that if you didn't feel confident closing the nonconformity at the 12-month mark, you shouldn't. However, there should be at least some verification prior to the 12-month mark for you to draw that conclusion. So maybe you did a verification at the 90-day mark, at the 60-day mark, at the 9-month mark, and you're going to do one at the 12-month mark, and you're just generating evidence and gaining confidence that it can be closed. But no verification activities by the 12-month mark would be problematic. Amos has a great suggestion because I'm getting a lot of comments about human error. On the human error piece, he writes, isn't there a step to determine if the person knew, was trained, and did not perform, or if the person was never trained? That might lead to a system-based response. Yeah, you need to figure out why the person didn't do what they were supposed to do. Were they not trained? Were they trained, but the training was not effective? Perhaps there wasn't a way to verify the effectiveness of the training. And you're right, Amos, that may help lead you to a system-based response. Getting a question from an auditor will accept a root cause solved with the first why. I struggle to think that you'll get to the true root cause of an issue in one why, Jose, but it may be possible. I'm gonna wait for a few minutes to see if additional questions come in. Salim is asking about risk assessment. Not really sure what you mean about risk assessment. Obviously, you should, if you're using a tool like a FEMA to analyze risk, analyze and quantify risk, if you implement a corrective action that may reduce the risk, and that tool should be updated. Karen's bringing up, there are often quality metrics tied to the timeliness of corrective action closure. How would you address this or modify these types of metrics? Yeah, I think it's an unfair metric would be closing all nonconformities 90 days after they're initiated. I think more appropriate and meaningful metrics, Karen, might be, for example, completing problem solving within 15 calendar days, or preventing no recurrence of issues after they're closed. So not necessarily tying the metric to closure of the issue, because who knows how long an issue may take to close, and maybe a situation that doesn't present itself very often. Brenda, I'm not really understanding your question about 5 whys is based on nonconformity or evidence. It's based on the whole thing. Obviously, your why questions will be based on the symptoms that were presented. So it may appear that it's coming from the objective evidence, but keep in mind that you've got to fix the broken system. I hope that addresses your question. While we wait for additional questions, again, a copy of the slides and a recording of today's presentation will be available for download at www.pjr.com in about 24 to 48 hours at the conclusion of today's presentation. Additionally, if you visit our website, you'll get information on a bunch of new and exciting webinars. Okay, getting a couple additional questions. Brenda is stating, I will start doing the first why, questioning the nonconformity statement or the objective evidence statement. Well, you've got to start with the objective evidence, Brenda, because that's the specific incident that you're basing your questions on. Why was there the escape or the symptom? But you want to make sure when you think you get to the final why, depending how many why questions it takes you, that final why is really addressing this systemic breakdown. Okay, folks, I appreciate your time today, and I hope you found this webinar helpful. Have a great afternoon.